Roe v. Wade. That is going to be the topic, sort of. Okay. Evidently, it is the anniversary, the 40-something anniversary of Roe v. Wade. What was it, 1973, I think? So 45th anniversary of Roe v. Wade. So it was this historical Supreme Court decision regarding women's reproductive rights, specifically in terms of induced abortions and unconditional, as far as I'm aware, when it was originally passed, that there were no real provisions or contingencies, that this was a matter of a woman's right to choose to terminate her pregnancy, and not abortion in the sense of miscarriage where it was involuntary, but to voluntarily, to intentionally, to induce the abortion or the termination of the pregnancy. And that has been a landmark Supreme Court decision that still has not really shown any sign of an overturn that I'm aware of. And this is not a video for me to get on a soapbox and get preachy and talk to you about how great this law is or how awful this law is. I'm not taking a position on this issue for this video because I think that would be very counterintuitive to, again, the reason I even established this channel, which was to teach people principles and methods of writing, how to get everyone writing out there and how to write better. Obviously, I can't make people write better, and there's plenty of other writers that are far better than I am. But in order to help develop, I guess is the best way to articulate it, to help develop writers out there, to assist in coaching writers out there, that's always been my intention, my desire for all of this. So why am I even bringing up Roe v. Wade, this incredibly divisive decision and divisive topic? And the last thing we really need is more division online and offline within the country, and to allow more media distortion to further create that divide between people, between different groups. I lost my train of thought. This is what happens all too frequently. The reason that I'm bringing up this topic is because I want to very briefly share principles of writing political essays or books, novellas, whatever I don't know why I said novella, because I guess political fiction, but really this pertains more to nonfiction. If you're writing any sort of blurb or essay, or if you're writing for some news outlet, if you're guest writing or guest blogging for, I don't know, the Huffington Post or BuzzFeed or Breitbart or whatever, then one of the principal core tenets of political writing is, of course, to fact check everything, but to also make sure that your scholarly sources are not subreddits. Not to say that you don't find gems on subreddits, but you really can't use them as scholarly sources, just like Wikipedia really can't be used as a scholarly source. But you might find scholarly sources on a subreddit or on a Wikipedia page, and you can use that so long as you check that source to ensure that it does not give any misinformation or disinformation or whatever you want to call it. So with political writing, that is a huge thing, is to make sure that what you're talking about is even factually correct. Before you even get into the opinion portion, make sure that at least the bedrock is well, that it's a bedrock, that it's not sand, that it's not shifting, cracked foundation, that that your whole argument is based at least on actual data. So abortion is one of those topics where everyone becomes very divided uh, and becomes very emotional. And so you have, there's really not a binary here. It's not so much, okay, Democrats and Republicans and anyone who identifies a certain way must be a Democrat and vice versa, and anyone who identifies this way must be a Republican or vice versa. There really is no way to just collectively categorize people because they identify a certain way, and no, two beliefs, I suppose you'd say, are created equal. So look at it more as a spectrum, a political spectrum, and you have these gradiences of left to right, and some people may be far more left than others, some may be far more right than others, but there's not one type of liberal or one type of conservative or one type of libertarian or one type of anarchist or populist or whatever. The list goes on. Socialist, democratic socialist, communist, fascist, uh, Marxist. You have all these statist. You have all these different words, and they all fit on this spectrum. So with the abortion issue, you you have a lot of people that say on the left, uh, they create an argument around the concept of women's rights. So you go back 100 years in time, and the issue was suffrage or the right to vote. There was at one point in time, women did not have a right to vote, and there was a women's movement. The feminist movement, the first wave feminist movement. Before they started dressing up as body parts and other weird things. They had class, and I'm going to go ahead and throw that out there. They had class, and they had a movement for rights that should have, from the very beginning, applied to them. One of which, very simply, was the right to vote. So that slowly segued into more, I would say, aggressive, abrasive, controversial subjects, again, namely abortion. And you had some women, well, men and women, you had some people who said, well, this is a women's rights issue. This is a health issue, a public health issue. And so they said, well, it's the woman's choice then to protect herself. And then you have people that lean more on the right, or even the far right, that say, well, or in the right in general, say, well, it's not a matter of woman's right or public health. It's a matter of preserving human life that is forming inside the woman's body. And the issue you get into is that the far left become very emotional and just scream, bigotry and misogyny and rape and all this stuff. And then on the far right, you're using religious rhetoric, and it's not that the left or the right has no validation in their position. I think that they definitely have their place, and I think that some emotional rhetoric is okay to use supplementary, but to use it as the core of your position is very weak. It's very intellectually weak, and I think that you always want to approach something in nonfiction intellectually, unbiasedly, or I should say unprejudicedly, but you want to make it as neutral as possible. And then when you give your opinion, it's I think it's more validated in the eyes of the public, because if you get very emotional and there's not a whole lot of data and statistics put in there, then if you lean far left, the only people to whom you really appeal are other people who lean left, and the same with the right. If you are more right wing on this issue or any issue, then when you make your appeal to emotion, which is a logical fallacy, if you're debating the other side, you're only going to appeal to the people that already identify as you do on that issue. So I'm sure some of this is very obvious, but I think it needs. I think our current climate demands that we review these basic principles, and I want to tie that into writing. So for those of you out there who are very passionate, whether it's about the abortion issue or topic or some other topic, which may even be political, maybe it's economic, maybe it's social, maybe it's religious, maybe it's irreligious, maybe it's anything. Those are the big ones I can think of. But whatever you're passionate about writing about, just ensure that you do your research. And even if you're wrong, it's okay to be wrong. Of course, opinions, everybody has one, and it may not be that it's really about being right or wrong. A lot of times, the discovery of truth, and not to sound too, epistemological here, but just trying to progress, trying to advance as a society or as an individual, that discovery, that journey, requires research, and it's okay to be wrong, because at the end of the day, it's not really about our ego. It's about just simply, transitioning from blue pill to red pill. Again, that's another Matrix reference for those of you who may not have seen that masterful trilogy. So, just to kind of wrap this up, because I know I'm going well over what I wanted these videos to be at in terms of length and duration, is that when you are writing anything, be intellectually honest. Research the topic. You don't have to do it exhaustively. You don't have to spend years scouring libraries and going off to Oxford or something. You have Google on your phone. Um, just you can spend a few minutes, or you can spend a couple hours. Depends on how exhaustive your paper or your book is going to be. But have just a few modestly um, scholarly sources. They don't have to be from the Britannica encyclopedia, but just have something that's reasonable to substantiate your claim. So drive your stake in the ground. Say, this is the position I'm taking, and here are the facts. Here's the statistical data to substantiate my position, to reinforce my position, and then you can call for someone to rebut it, and that's okay if they rebut it or don't rebut it. The point is, you did your due diligence to make an intelligent position on something, and that is more than what I really expect for the most part from people nowadays. So I know right now New York passed that new law, so that in the event that Roe v. Wade is ever overturned, and there's now no federal law to protect the woman's right to choose to terminate her baby, New York has now a state level precedent set that would protect that right, unless it then was presented a second time, or whatever the number of times it would have been, back to the Supreme Court, and then they make a federal decision on whether or not abortion is a public health issue, and if that's a right to the woman. And one other thing about that issue in particular is that we tend to create the binary that the left is pro-choice and that the right is pro-life. And the interesting thing is, again, with the divisive emotional rhetoric and little data that you see used in the media, there's not one side that's pro-choice and one side that's pro-life. Both sides are pro-choice. The division is on to whom the choice is given. Does the woman have the autonomy to choose the fate of the child, or does the child have the autonomy to choose the fate of himself or herself, or to some people, its self? And that's really where the battle begins. And you can already see my point that we can't even have an intellectual discussion on something this controversial, because we can't even come together and be direct about what the issue even is. So again, that's not me taking a position on the left side or the right side. That is me simply saying, you as a writer, I think, have a responsibility to be intellectually honest and to I could be very hokey and say use the power of the pen for the forces of good and not evil, and I guess I mean that. But um, what I really want to drive home is that with that responsibility as a writer, even if you're not really a journalist, that when you approach something as serious as politics, that you need to be intellectually honest. Do your research. It's okay to be wrong, but make sure that whatever position you take, that you took it without prejudice. And I think that would apply to most, if not all, nonfiction, but especially, as I said before, in this climate, in the political arena, we need intellectual honesty now more than ever.